Good morning, everybody. We're going to kick off today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. We had over 200 registrants today, so really a popular topic. So this is Digitizing Your Stormwater program with Mapistry. We're going to be talking about how to use software to really digitize a stormwater program, specifically around for industrial facilities, thinking about risk factors, regulations, personnel changeover, kind of all those things that you as an environmental professional or EHS professional, or even just an operations leader has to deal with when thinking about stormwater. So a couple housekeeping items to take care of. We are going to record this, so there'll be a copy for you. We're also going to do a blog summary, and we'll send out copies of these slides that we go over. So if you ever need to review something or want to share it with somebody else within your team, this will all be available to you. The other thing to mention is I've got a little time at the end for some questions. If we don't get to them, we can follow up via email. But just a reminder to submit your questions through the chat function in the GoToWebinar side panel, and I'll try to queue them up and answer as many as I can. And if it seems appropriate, I'll answer it kind of midway through. The format for today, because really the goal is to give you a good understanding of how can you digitize your stormwater program with Mapistry, and really some of the things that we thought about and experienced as environmental professionals, how we built that into the software to really automate more, give more visibility into your program, and really drive accountability across an entire organization. So the goal today, a few slides setting the context, and then we're going to dive into the software itself, and I'm going to walk you through a bunch of scenarios showing how the software can be used for stormwater programs specifically. So before we even get started today, I want to make this a little interactive. So I want to launch a poll to the audience here, and just want to understand how many facilities you currently oversee, because that kind of matters when we talk about analytics or standardization or other items that you might have to think about as part of your stormwater program. So I'm going to launch a poll now for all of you. We'll give it a few seconds so that you have time to fill it out. And I'm going to share the results with all of you. I see them trickling in. Give it about another 10 seconds. All right, so I'm going to share the results. So it looks like a lot of folks on this call today, about 2/3 of you are in that 1 to 5 category. So a handful of facilities, maybe you're managing just a facility yourself, and you're doing everything from SWIP updates to map updates to inspections to collect the samples yourself. So that's good to know. And one of the things I'll do is tailor the conversation a little bit away from some of the analytics portion where you might look at it when you're over 20 locations or 100. I'll just give you a quick snapshot of that. If you're in that latter group and want to dive deeper into the analytics side, we'll give you a quick snapshot today, but then we can maybe go into it a little bit more at another time. All right, so you should be able to see my slides again, and if not, let me know. I'm Ryan Janoch. For many of you on the call, you may already know me. For folks that are customers, you probably are already familiar with myself or others on the team. But for those of you that are new to Mapistry, I'm one of the co-founders here. I come from the civil engineering environmental side, and a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is stuff I did very manually as an environmental consultant. And this webinar was, talking internally with the team was a little funny because we originally started as a GIS mapping company, and about 6 years ago, we started building tools specifically for the environmental space around stormwater. So this is for, this is kind of going back to our roots in a lot of ways. We've since expanded. Mapistry covers a number of and S areas, but stormwater was one of the original areas we focused on. And as you'll see today, there's a lot of tools that we've built over time specifically for stormwater. So one of the big drivers here is if we look in the past, 3-ring binders, paper forms for stormwater programs. In the past 5 years, the rules have changed a lot. In the past, 5+ years ago, the rules were a lot simpler, as we saw in the California market. 2015 really marked a turning point from a permitting perspective. Similarly, in other states, even in the past few years, with the updates in Texas, and then just more recently, which we'll show you, is the federal EPA's multi-sector general permit changing. 5+ years ago, a lot simpler rules for stormwater. And honestly, there was minimal oversight. You didn't see a lot of big stormwater penalties or NOVs. And I think that's changed today. One of the things that we find when we talk to companies out there is the speed of regulatory compliance is changing rapidly. Also, there's a need to be more connected with your facilities and the data that you're collecting here. I'm going to pause real quick. It seems like people are not seeing the slides, so let me just. All right, should be able to now. So just to recap, there's a need to be more connected here with data, facilities, people. There's also, the complexity of the regulations are changing rapidly. There's more to deal with, whether it be on a watershed specific basis, whether it be tied to your business license maybe, or just the amount of the data that needs to be collected as part of your permit, more sampling requirements, more follow-up actions. And then, as I'll point out, there's some pretty sharp consequences these days, and we're seeing that rise with one of the biggest Clean Water Act lawsuits, in the past few years with $50 million out of Texas, is the consequences are getting sharper. For folks in California or the Chesapeake Bay or the Pacific Northwest, you've always experienced like citizen lawsuits and Clean Water Act problems. But we're seeing it more and more. We've seen a rise in like the Southeast US, in Georgia environment, in Arkansas, and especially as you start getting the blending of processed water and stormwater, we've seen a rise in those consequences. And just to kind of hammer home, and this slide gets used a lot if folks are advocating for budget internally, the potential penalty costs can be quite large here. Stormwater, $56,000+ per day. I put the sampling NOV on the left-hand side here, $10,000 per day. We're seeing this a lot more, those kind of mandatory minimum penalty letters saying, hey, you didn't submit a report, or you didn't collect your samples, it's $10,000 a day violation. So we're seeing the rapid rate of that come out from regulators. And then at the other end, the Texas case, $50 million around plastic pellets. And then some others, $750,000, $1.5 million. These are the fines continue to go up over the past 5 to 10 years around stormwater. And it's something that at Mapistry we talk a fair amount about. We've written some reports on the litigation side. So if you want to dive deeper into this issue, there's a bunch of resources that we can provide on some of these specifics. So how do companies deal with it? And I think that's really the point for today, is the most savvy companies are dealing with these compliance demands with minimal disruptions to their business. How do you deal with compliance, a core function of operating, without disrupting the like money-making, operational aspects, production aspects of your business? And that's really where we come in. And my goal, and Mapistry's goal, is to give you that control of your environmental program. Really put it inside the hands of the folks in your company, whether that be operations folks on the ground, operations folks at corporate, or the environmental or the AHS team. I come from a consulting background, but I'm a big believer in internalizing operations for cost efficiencies and just better quality programs, because the facilities, the nuances, the people. And that's our whole goal, is to put everything in one place for companies. The key to this, I think, is one, give companies visibility, but also make it really usable and simple. And what we're going to talk about today from a stormwater perspective is how do we make it so simple and usable for somebody in the field that's a non-environmental professional to get an inspection done or collect a sample and know exactly where to go. So that's what we'll talk about today. So a couple things is like why now? We've talked about them around the pace of regulatory drivers, but I think it's worth pointing out that even in the past year or so, and if you haven't considered using technology for your stormwater program or other parts of your environmental program. COVID really put a lot of pressure on companies to adapt and change, working remotely. And I think the adoption of technology has greatly increased, from a year ago around that. The other big factor is we've got a new administration. We've had a bunch of webinars from some really great people in the legal industry and elsewhere talking about the impacts of the Biden administration, the appointments with Merrick Garland as Attorney General and his own environmental background, and the focus of the DOJ on environmental, and then also on the EPA side, is a continued enforcement around industrial facilities. So I think this is going to change over the next 3-4 years. We're already seeing some of that initially. And then from that, this is EPA specific, is the national compliance initiatives, probably going to switch back to national enforcement initiatives. That combined with the rise of remote enforcement, the COVID pressure, but this had started really before COVID with drones and sensors and remote technology. I think for really savvy companies, they're trying to stay ahead of this from an enforcement perspective and using technology, because from a regulatory perspective, they certainly are using technology. The other thing is we're seeing technology on the citizen group side, the $50 million, the Formosa Plastics case. It's a massive one, and I think a really kind of scary proposition for a lot of companies. And we don't anticipate any drop off on citizen suits. I would see an uptick, especially tied to the administration impact, and kind of maybe more support from EPA or DOJ on enforcement lawsuits. And the other big thing from a technology data perspective is we see this continued public data sets. EPA under the Trump administration continued what Obama was doing, but increased it a lot. You actually see a huge spike in the amount of public environmental data out there under the Trump administration. I only anticipate the Biden administration can continue that accelerated pace. That puts more data in the hands of local regulators. It puts more data in the hands of citizen groups. And it just, even from a PR standpoint, it's a little more dangerous for companies because there's all this data out there. And we hear more and more of reports from a director of environmental getting an email from a citizen saying, hey, I'm standing next to your shipping terminal and you've got track out, here's the photo of it. That kind of citizen scientist movement, and that looking at the data can be very dangerous for companies from a PR perspective, from getting reported to regulators. So you want to stay ahead of this curve and kind of find those gaps. And then the next generation is, as we hear about it, AI and machine learning is taking all this data and then enforcing based on gaps found in the data using AI and machine learning. And this is one of the studies out of Stanford that EPA is looking at and partnering with them on, is how do we adopt this? So it's not a person going out asking for your records, but we just spot problems from the data itself. All this means is companies really need to think about their strategies and maybe proactively identify where their gaps in their program are and use technology to counter the technology that's coming at them from a regulatory citizen group side. So a couple common pitfalls I want to highlight, and I'm gonna ask you at the end of it, where your experiences are. But one is, and I think this is common in EHS programs in general, stormwater is just one of the many, but it's a lot to keep track of. And I think when we talk to folks, whether they're in the environmental side or the operations, it's just a lot. You have to train staff, review program performance, calculate sample results, submit them to the state, then go do your annual report. And then, by the way, after you've done an inspection, you got to get copies to put it in the record section and then communicate corrective actions. It's a lot to manage. This is one of the things, I think, stormwater in particular, there's a lot going on, and there's just huge opportunities to use technology to take all of this and put it in one place and automate, a third or half of these problems that you're seeing here to keep track of. We can automate that with software. So the other big pitfall we see, and we've done an inspection-specific webinar, is, and I'm sure folks have heard this, if you're managing teams doing it, I didn't know about it. Where's the binder? I'm not trained on that. I didn't know I was supposed to do that. We'll do it better next time, I promise. We lost the forms. I need to drive to go get those forms. Like, this is where we find inspection programs in general, but especially around stormwater. If you're doing it monthly or quarterly, and you're relying on non-environmental personnel, this is a common like gap, is just the basics on inspections, is they just don't have the right tools for the job at the end of the day. And it's a big part from a software side, is what we can do is we can give them a mobile app that has the form, it has the reminder, it gives them everything they need to do. So you don't get all that, I didn't know about it, I forgot, I didn't have the right tools. Because a lot of folks rely on non-environmental staff to do parts of their stormwater program. And that could be inspections, it could be sampling, and even if you're doing it yourself, you may not be a full-time environmental professional. You may have 100 other things to do on day-to-day. And even for some of our smallest customers, it's nice just having the certainty of a form that's going to walk them through what they need to do. They document it and they're done. Because for most folks that are not environmental professionals, they want the tools to make it go quickly and easily, and that they don't like fall down one of the gaps that we showed before. The other thing, and especially as we're looking at maybe 5, 10 plus facilities, especially, for the 9% of you that said 21 to 50 facilities, 11% said 100 plus facilities. If you're not spotting trends, sampling results before the end of the year, that can be problematic. If you don't know those gaps in the inspection program, another common pitfall. And then if you're getting the inspections done, but there were never any corrective actions, I don't know what industrial site I've ever walked on that has been completely 100% spotless. Every time I go on an industrial site, there's always something that you find. So you want to do the inspections, but you also want to document where you might have a couple of problems, and then you fix them right away. If we see, 5 years of inspection records and it was perfect every single time they went out there, if I'm an inspector, that raises some red flags, because most industrial sites are not like that. So the other thing we mentioned a little early on is the pace of regulations. California, SB 205, now your business license is tied to your stormwater permit. You have to get a stormwater permit in order, or show that you're exempt, in order to get your business license or renew that. That's a huge amount, and that's where your environmental program, that, conditions to operate, it's really putting pressure on your operations, because you can't operate legally without that business license. I anticipate that other states will start doing this. There are provisions in most stormwater permits for some of those other sectors around warehousing and transportation that really should at least evaluate whether they need a stormwater permit or not, and are not. And California is using this as a way to put pressure on them, and that's working. We're seeing a huge uptick in the number of companies at least thinking about and evaluating whether they need a stormwater permit. The other new one is EPA level, covers 4 states, plus like Puerto Rico, DC, Virgin Islands. 2021 multi-sector general permit, so industrial stormwater permit came out. And these are a couple examples, but there's a whole bunch of new regs. They went through a presentation recently and showed the 2015, 2021, and the differences. More sampling criteria. They have to post a sign at the facility. These type of things, the pace of regulation is changing, and we'll see that trickle down to other states. So I'm going to pause here and launch another poll for you. I'm really curious how many folks rely on non-environmental personnel to collect stormwater samples or do inspections. And I think that'll be really interesting for the whole audience here. We'll give it about 10 seconds to go through this. And I think this is a topic that, pre-COVID, when we had a lot of people in person and did workshops, but even now, it's a really great discussion topic. And it's one that we get asked a lot, just like, how do you get engagement with non-environmental personnel? How do you ensure things are done correctly? And even just peer-to-peer resource sharing around it. So I'm going to share the results with all of you. So 57% rely on non-environmental personnel to do inspections and samples. So about what I expected. I was expecting a little higher, but more in the 2/3, 3/4 range. But for non-environmental personnel collecting samples and inspections, I'm curious if there's questions around that in terms of how you get engagement, how you ensure it's getting done, those type of things. All right, so now we're going to jump into the software side, and I'm going to show you a few things. And I put together this list. We're going to start at a high level doing multi-site analytics. One of the cool things Mapistry is coming out with is we've got a brand new analytics platform coming out in the coming months. I'm going to show you the current analytics platform around inspection, sampling data, tasks, those type of things. But the new analytics platform is coming out, and for customers on the call, you'll probably start seeing announcements around it and talking with your customer success managers around what's coming for analytics, because it will significantly increase what you can do from a data side. The other thing I'm going to show you is around inspections and how those are done, how you can set up a template and actually have that standardized process across lots of locations and flow into like doing corrective actions and tasks. Then, as it ties to the like non-environmental folks, is like, how do you know if they're collecting samples? How do they get a heads up saying, hey, it's going to rain, get ready to sample? And then the final piece that we're going to talk about is really around stuff that doesn't happen as frequently, but is really critically important. Updating maps and SWIFTs, typically done industry-wide at least once a year. It's a big red flag if you haven't done it in the past year. And the same with training, annually training. So I'm going to show you some of the e-learning stuff where you can put like a large volume of people to at least give them the basics on e-learning. So with that, I'm going to jump over to the Mapistry platform here. And what you're seeing, and we're starting, as I said, at a high level on an analytics side. So right now, what we're looking at is inspection records. If I'm managing multiple locations, and I'll show you if you're only doing one site, it's a little bit easier to see. But if I'm managing multiple locations, I can see at a glance what's been completed, what hasn't, who's doing them late, and I can look at the specifics. If I drill into this in Georgia, I can see the Temple, Georgia site has done 2 on time and missed 1, but the Atlanta site has done 2, but they did it late and they missed 1 also. So over this time period that I'm looking at, past few months, not doing so hot. They both have missed 1. Atlanta's a little slow on getting it in. So I can look at some of those inspections. And what that does as an environmental professional or a leader is it allows you to focus your time. And we've all got limited time. I know personally, like looking at the data, I can only address so many things in a day. So if I look at the data, I can then focus my limited resources on wherever the gaps are. Maybe it's facilities that are chronically submitting inspections late. Maybe it's facilities that are not doing them at all, and that's a conversation we need to have. So it allows me on a programmatic level to focus my time in the right area and at least have some confidence that I know where my gaps are, because a lot of folks that we talk to have, when they're first coming in and looking at their programs, they're like, I don't even know where the gaps are. And one of the drivers for putting in a system like Mapistry is just trying to find, can I identify where the gaps are, and then I can go do something about it. The other piece, and I'm going to jump over to a task side or a corrective action side here, is I can look at who's actually creating corrective actions. As I talked about before, one of the pitfalls is we do all our inspections, but we don't actually create any corrective actions for my stormwater. It's perfect site, never need to change out filters, those type of things, never need to sweep the site. That's just, it's a perfect site, so I never have any issues and I never have any tasks. Well, we know that's not true. So this allows you to look at that and maybe find facilities where they haven't had any tasks ever created in a year, in 2 years, and allows you to go back in and have that as like a learning moment or a teaching tool. So I'm going to pause here. Remind you all that you can submit questions through the side chat panel if you wanted to, and I can go into specifics on software if you have them, but just a reminder to submit your questions. So we looked at inspections, we looked at tasks, and I'll show you the like nitty gritty of how a site does it. But then we're going to jump over to like parameter status, knowing, am I in baseline, am I level 1, level 2, tier 3, all the different, and we see this with the federal permit coming out, having exceedance levels. So you kind of know where your sites are at across a programmatic level. And then even before that, you can actually look at your lab data. And I'll talk about how our team gets you onboarded, set up. But what you can do is have your lab send the lab results into Mapistry so that you're not doing manual data entry. So, limited time, don't want to do manual data entry. But the cool thing is, especially if you're managing multiple sites, is you're seeing all this data streaming in, and you can know where your problem areas are. You can know when you're starting to go over those benchmarks and limits. So not only are we taking the manual data entry out of it, but we're giving you those insights into the Stormwater program where you can start looking at, percent exceedances, or where am I starting to struggle before the end of the year. One of the common things is we look at all the exceedances at the end, or the lab data at the end of the year. We dig out the PDFs and look through them, and I'm like, oh no, we're over. What do we do now? It's too late to change anything this year. We're in the next year, or we've already got issues. So you want to get that data in real time and be able to look at it from an analytics perspective and see how you're doing. Like this, I can see I'm starting to exceed outside the pH of 9 here. I've got a couple sample results, and I can actually see which locations those are tied to. So that's the analytics portion. I'm now going to jump into more a site level view of it. And as I said, we are coming out with some new analytics. And I'll actually, before we jump in, I'll show you that. So some of the cool analytics we're coming out with is location-based data. So I can see which sites on a map in a region, drill down, percent of tasks complete by location. These are all 100%. I can see my facilities. I can click on them and actually drill into the data at the facility level. I can also look at inspection status, sampling data in more granularity, even look at standard deviations for all the statistical folks out there that really want to dive into it. Our new analytic platform will greatly increase those capabilities. I can look at those same inspection records, but if I click on them, I can actually drill into the specifics of them and pull data tables and all. So much more enhanced, and if you're managing at a program level, this will give you a lot more analytical capabilities and a lot more to do with it, and kind of questions to ask your data. So this is coming, and if you're a Mapistry customer, you've probably heard some of the team talk about it already, because we're pretty excited about what's coming out in the coming months from an analytics side. So now we're going to jump over to the site level, and I'm going to start in the mapping portion because as I said, 6 years ago, we really made a big shift into the environmental space, but originally we were a GIS mapping company. And that mapping technology underlies all of this that you're seeing. And I'll show you how it even ties into inspection forms and the sampling data and all. But what you're looking at, and for non-GIS professionals, this is meant to be a anybody can use it. We've had, assistant superintendents of schools build their stormwater maps. We've had folks that have never done GIS before easily make the updates. But it is a GIS platform. On the left here are a bunch of layers that are preloaded here, and I'll add a couple more as I show you. In the lower left, there's maps. And I'm actually going to add another map right off the bat, because one of the things you can do is you can create a whole map book. It doesn't have to be just for stormwater. It can be a number of items. So I'm actually going to add a fire extinguisher map in here because I'll show you how to add layers and add fire extinguishers in. But I'm going to stay on the stormwater map. And what I'm going to do to start is I'm actually going to grab my polygon here, and I'm going to start just clicking around, and I want to digitize the boundary of, say, my site here. And I've got some of my tools, and then I'm going to go to the layer. I'm going to go to the site boundary. I'm just going to call it site. I'm going to save it. And one of the things to think about from a stormwater side is maps are core. And if you're used to paying a consultant to do it, or if you're a consultant doing it and spending a lot of time or asking a GIS or CAD department, the goal here for a facility is to not have to go outside your company necessarily to go get this done. You can do it internally and really quickly. So if I have this site boundary, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, and then I'm going to grab this other polygon, and I'm going to check. I've got a buildings layer here on the left. And I'm going to grab the next polygon, and I'm just going to outline my building. I'm going to add it to the buildings layer. We'll just call this a shop. And I've got my building layer in there. Now I'm going to drop some discharge locations, so sampling outfalls. So I'm going to put one right here. I see a storm drain. I'm going to call that a discharge location. Outfall number 1. And I'm going to grab my line and I'm going to show the flow direction here. And it even gives you a takeoff if you want to see the, how much, what the length is. And then I'm going to put it, if I have a drainage area coming out this other back corner, I'm going to put another flow area here. And then I'm going to add a few more flow direction areas to my site. Say it's pitched a little bit. And then I'm going to grab this marker. I'm going to put my other discharge point here. Discharge locations. It recognizes that it's the second outfall, automatically labels it. You can always change it. And then one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to draw some drainage areas really quickly here. I'm going to say this is a drainage area for the front half of the property. And as you'll see, one of the key requirements, and I'll call this DA1, is you're updating your SWIP and your sitemap, and as things change or you need to add on other items, the goal here from a software side is to make it really easy to actually do that. So I'm going to actually grab my building, assuming there's some like roof downspouts here. And I'm going to make this all drainage area 2. It's going to automatically detect that. And I've got drainage area 2 here now. Now the cool thing, and one of the things, pitfalls wise, is like stuff's not getting updated. You've got a tool now to update maps. One of the other ones is like if you're relying on personnel to go collect those samples, if I click on this, I can actually put a lot of information in here, and I can actually even add photos. So I'm going to grab a photo. I know this isn't quite representative of probably what an urban environment is, but it's a good representation from like what an outfall might look like on the, the stormwater map if I'm embedding a photo here. Because if I'm going out to collect samples, I can come into this map and then that's loaded in. I can click on that and then I can see, okay, I am supposed to collect a sample right there. And some folks will even put an arrow and say, collect it in this spot, because you don't want somebody going out and like dragging the sample container through the dirt swale and filling it with sediment where, blows out your TSS numbers. You want to have a really good representative sample. So embedding photos in maps can really help communicate that, especially if you have non-environmental personnel doing it. So that's some of the mapping functionality. Now what I want to show you is I'm actually going to go over to my fire extinguisher map I had created. You'll notice nothing's on there. So I'm going to turn on the site boundary because these layers are shared. And then I'm going to add another layer called fire extinguishers. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And if I have fire extinguishers, I'm going to grab the marker tool. And the reason I'm doing this is I just want to show you how you can extend the capabilities of the Mapistry platform, especially from mapping. If you're using it for stormwater, how some of the other areas come into play. So I'm just going to drop a couple on here. And you'll notice it's kind of boring blue dots, but I can actually come in here and change the style of it. And I'm going to make it red. I'm going to make some teardrops. And I can start creating a map, but I can always toggle back to my stormwater map here. And then if I need to make an update as something moves around, you saw the drawing tools, lines, polygons, points. There's an edit button, and if I click on that, say this flow direction isn't quite right. It's actually more like over here, and it's coming down into like a concrete swale. I can adjust that and make those changes, and then I can download a new 11:17 map that's got a nice title bar. Don't have to go to a CAD department or a consultant to get the maps output. So you're able to keep your kind of core company documents up to date, but also have tools like the embedded photo for folks to know where they need to go to do inspections and collect samples and all of that. So that's the mapping component. I'm actually going to flip over now to the site level. And this is really looking at a site-specific basis. We looked at analytics at the high level. Now we're down at the site level. And on the left, you see a bunch of my demo sites here. I'm on this California terminal site right here. And what I'm looking at, and for somebody on the ground, it gives me my to-do list, right? I've got a fuel tank containment clean out that's really overdue. That's creating a warning for me. And then my stormwater inspection, also 8 days overdue. I'm not doing so great on getting this done, but I can also see what's coming up, what I've completed. So this is my tasks. And then I've got my compliance calendars. What do I need to do on a routine basis? And this is where the web app ties into the mobile app. So if I'm going to come over here, I'm going to actually first start with creating an inspection template. Usually as part of the setup, our team will work with you to get it set up, but I want to show you all how that works. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a template. I've got some info in here. If I want to add some other BMPs to inspect, I can do something like, downspouts from the roof, free of debris. I'm going to default to no deficiencies, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I've got this list of best management practices. I've got a nice standardized form. One of the things we can do is like apply the same inspection items across a wide variety of sites. But if I come in here, and if I'm doing the inspection, I can come in, I'm going to do my April inspection. I'm just going to click on it, and it's going to walk me section by section through all the things I need to inspect. And the same with the mobile app. It's the same form, same template, and it ties in here. And that mobile app you can do offline, no Wi-Fi, no internet, or you can have somebody come in, log in, and do it right here on the web. So you'll notice that it's the current date and time. So it's picking up stuff automatically. It's also tying into weather and pulling in the weather automatically. The goal here is like, how can we automate as much as possible around an inspection program? That's really our goal here, because what we want to do is focus the attention on like the inspection items or the problem areas, not on filling out paperwork. So if I'm the inspector, I go through, click save. I'm going to jump over to my non-stormwater discharges. Are there any? No, there's, I'm good here. I'm going to go to the next. I'm going to go to my site sweeping BMP. All good here. Next section, all good. Now, trash and debris, there's maybe some, I've got trash by compactor, right? Now I'm going to add a task in, and clean by compactor. And the description is pick up all trash around the compactor and sweep. So we talked about, one, getting inspections done. You've got a standardized template, but two, if you find problems, how do you communicate them out without requiring a lot of your time? So now I can select, I'm going to assign it to myself, but I can create a corrective action, this task here. I can even create subtasks if it's a more complex issue. You need to hire a third-party vendor to do a clean out on an oil water separator or something. But for just a basic task, I can assign it to myself, put all this info in. I'm actually going to put a due date. I want it done by tomorrow. I'm going to add some attachments here. I've got a photo I want to put in. I could put a video, could put some, multiple photos in. But I've got trash by the compactor. I want to make sure that they know this is what needs to be fixed. And then I'm going to go to the next section. And I'm, dumpster lids closed, no problem. Storm drain filter insets, I'm okay there. Main entrance, the outfalls are clear of debris. Maybe I actually want to put that photo of the nice clean outfall in here just to show, even though there's not a deficiency, I still just want to document that things looked good when I walked by. Downspouts are free of debris, great. Other non-compliance issues, nothing there. I don't have any other notes. So you can see the green check marks. I've gone through this whole form. I'm going to save it. And if I'm doing it on this mobile app, it'll walk them through step by step on all the different inspection items that they actually need to complete. So now I'll go back to my kind of main site dashboard. And you'll notice there's a future task, right? It's due tomorrow. These are the ones that I got to get done, they're overdue. But this is my future task I just had. And you'll notice on the compliance calendar that inspection item is now checked off for April. So inspection done, I've identified a corrective action. The really cool part too is now for the inspector, they don't have to do anything else. So instead of taking that form, scanning, faxing, handing it off, what happens is when they do an inspection, that form automatically gets sent out. This is an example of one with a dumpster saying, hey, this inspection's been done and here are the corrective actions. Here's the list of things that we found. So if you're managing that site, you're automatically getting an email saying this has been done, here are the problems. And if you're assigning those corrective actions, you're getting an email saying, this is a problem we need you to fix. And it could even be at like a maintenance personnel level. So that communication loop is all automated. And then all the follow-up. So once a week, a summary email goes out with all the overdue, missed inspections, any kind of like corrective actions tied to your stormwater program. This is really designed to like, let's catch all the gaps in the program, missed inspections, corrective actions not completed, all of that, without having to jump on the phone or email. Did you clean out that storm drain? Yes, no. It allows us to focus on like the really big problems or coaching people up rather than chasing around paperwork. And for the inspector on the ground, you're not having to send in paperwork. You can just walk around the site like you normally are with your phone or a tablet and just do an inspection. And all the communication after that is automated for you. So that's stormwater inspections. Also applies sample visual observations. We saw the map, the sample location. If I come in here to go collect a sample, I'm going to actually add in, it ties directly into the map. So I'm going to put outfall 1 here. I can even put my pH data, and this could be done on a mobile app. I can add a photo of the pH meter, but I can record all my sample data in here. I can put my pH method. I'm going to use a pH meter. I calibrated it this morning, 7:45. No problems with non-stormwater discharges. I've got my notes, and then I'm going to save the whole form. And I have that 7.2 pH. Now, if you're on Mapistry and your lab data is streaming in, you would see the lab analytical from that sample in here. But what we're going to do is we're going to do some manual data entry just to show you. So I'm going to click on my sampling results, and I'm going to pull it up here. And I've got my form. You can see I've got to tie it in. Sorry, I've actually got to pull it in through my lab results on this one. So we'll skip the sampling results piece and not do it manually. But normally you'd fill out the form, you'd send your lab results in, and then the lab results would pull into Mapistry here. And you would see them here on the status, and then if you had exceedances. So let's jump over to one that's already got them in here. And then I can show you how that triggers the exceedances if you've collected a stormwater sample. So I'm going to scroll down here, and you can see like this one's, the COD is averaging over the limit. So you get a warning saying, hey, you're trending over your limit. An email also goes out once those lab results. And if I click in here, I can see, and there's a little visual notification saying, hey, COD is over. And then if I click in, I can see all my historical stormwater data back to 2000, past 3 years in this one. But I'm going to pull up a more recent sample result. And you can see where it's flagging data and it'll do all the calcs for you automatically rather than plugging it into Excel. It's going to run all the calcs for you automatically and tell you when you're starting to trend over based on whatever your state permit is. So one of the problems that we often find people run into is they don't collect samples. They've got somebody out on a site or somebody is responsible for it, but they don't actually collect those samples. So what's built into Mapistry is a rain alert. And what happens is when a rain event is forecasted with greater than 50% chance of rain, it'll send out an email saying, heads up, storm's coming, make sure you're ready to sample. And they'll get an email, and this prevents that like data gap at the end of the year of like, I didn't actually collect my stormwater sample because I didn't know about it. I wasn't ready. So one, automate those alerts. But then after the fact, and if you're managing sites, is you can see when it's rained. So this will keep an automatic rain log of like, it rained 0.37 inches. We probably should have collected a stormwater sample there. And there should be some notes in here if we did not. Maybe we have a basin on site and it didn't discharge. Snap a photo of that outfall showing no discharge. Because if you ever get sued, inspected by regulators, it's really nice to be able to pull up a rain log and say, because one of the things in the citizen lawsuits is like they'll put the list of rain events just like this and say, why didn't you sample? It was over 0.1 or over 0.15. And if you have that, this is where you can use the technology to counteract what they're using from a technology side. because you have a record of it. Even if you don't put the notes in, at least you've got it automatically logged. But it's even more powerful if you have like notes as to why you didn't sample or photos. So rain alerts, rain logs, critical component to making sure you're actually getting samples collected. Now, the final piece, or sorry, two parts. One thing I'm going to show you is the SWIP update. Now, this is available for a few states currently, but we actually have a SWIP builder. So this is a California one. I'm going to start from scratch. And if you've ever used TurboTax, it's a lot like that. It's going to ask you a whole series of questions. It's going to take about an hour, and it's going to generate your whole stormwater plan. And once you've done that, you can go back in and make edits to it. So you always have that up-to-date stormwater plan, because really the industry standard is once a year, you're going in and making those SWIP updates. So you can see it's going to pull in some basic facility information. It's actually going to pull in some stuff from the map directly. This is where having one platform tying it all together is really, really powerful. But I can go through and, one thing that's common is personnel changes over. So you always want to be checking to make sure your stormwater team is up to date. And I'm going to be doing sampling. So I can add in team members. It's going to export in a PDF, SWIP, about 30, 40 pages, but I can build out a whole roster of team members here. I can also go in and put all my BMPs in here, that you need for the state permit. What is it? The description, the potential pollutants that we're, trying to address, say metals. Maybe it's metal absorbing filter socks. And these are zeolite filter socks for metals removal around each drain. And we're just going to do it prior to rain events. And then we've got some vehicle maintenance that we're trying to address here. And I'm going to be responsible for it. And then the O&M check and replace each rain event. Probably not much needed for implementation if they're just filters, but I'm going to inspect them monthly. And it'll check to make sure that you filled out all the required sections for this particular state's SWIP. So for some states, about 6 states, there's actually a SWIP builder in here where you can write and update your own SWIPs. So you don't have to go, as we said, we're really big fans of internalizing, pulling it all into one platform. And then the final piece is training. So there's a whole course catalog around e-learning. So whether that's, you're on a transportation site and you need stormwater basics in Spanish, or a ReadyMix site, or you want to look at exceedance response actions or stormwater inspections, is how do you ensure that an entire team from basic to advanced is really well trained in stormwater? And you don't necessarily have to want to pull everybody off the shift and make them sit in a room and do this. And we've seen it more with COVID because you can't pull everybody together like that. Is how do you use technology like this so that they can come in and you can track course completions. You can remind them once a year to actually do this. And they really get a good understanding of best practices. And this goes back to both environmental and non-environmental personnel, kind of running your stormwater program, doing inspections, collecting samples. So this is where e-learning can really extend your capabilities and really make sure that you have good, well-documented training across an entire organization. I would say investment in training is one of the biggest things you can do to really improve a stormwater program. And that's usually a combination of, yourself working with folks on the ground, but also getting trained yourself or having others supplement that training with, online learning or e-learning. So with that, covered at a high level a bunch of different areas from, multi-site analytics to maps to inspections, tasks, rain alerts, stormwater data, SWIPs, training, trying to cover everything in your stormwater program. So I'm going to jump back in, and I see some questions coming in. So we're going to jump back into the presentation side. And really the goal here today, and I hope I covered it enough for all of you, is from digitizing a stormwater program, we're a real big believer that it is a platform's required. It's not just an inspection app. It's not just ArcGIS for mapping. It's everything together in one place. It's a comprehensive platform that pulls all these different pieces together, because ultimately our goal is how do we give you visibility, make it really easy, like an inspection app, for folks on the ground to hit these kind of key points. And this is why a lot of folks use Mapistry, is like, how can I have accountability, drive that accountability, but also how can I collaborate, give the documents to the person on the ground, have some transparency into the compliance health of my stormwater program. So the thing is with software is we don't just take software like Mapistry and throw it over the wall and hope you're successful with it. One of the things that's really important to us here, and about a third of our company is on this side, on the customer experience side, and it's really making sure that when you buy software, we get you set up, right? Kickoff calls, onboardings, document reviews, getting everything in the system so that when we hand you Mapistry for your stormwater program or some other environmental or EHS program, everything's ready to go for you and you can hit the ground running, and that your team is all trained up on it. So I think whether you're using Mapistry for your environmental program or another environmental software, this is critically important. This will make or break it. And I think it's one of the things why I'm really passionate about investing as, the co-founder in this company, is hiring more and more people on this side of the business, because ultimately I want all our customers to be incredibly successful so we can get quotes like these that just, I can open Mapistry and everything's there and this is super flexible. That's the kind of response I want, and why we're so passionate about investing on that side of the business. But just want to reassure that it's not just here's a piece of software, good luck with it. It's we're going to work with somebody that's a plant manager, batch plant operator, terminal manager, maintenance supervisor to be able to use the mobile app and get inspections done, all the way up to understanding the high level analytics, and our solutions engineering team being able to offer some recommendations and insights into those analytics. So to wrap things up, and we'll jump into questions. One, from a stormwater program perspective, we really want to drive usability and visibility through software. Tie it all together, one platform. My background, stormwater, a lot of the team's stormwater backgrounds, these tools are specifically designed by folks in the industry around solving all the stormwater issues out there. And then, as I said before, the customer experience team is really focused on making sure folks adopt. If you've ever tried other pieces of software, it's a struggle to get people to use the app or log in, and it's too hard. That's what we can do from both a product standpoint, make it really easy, but also a people standpoint of really engaging and driving that adoption and use. So my final poll question for you before we jump into questions from the audience is, do you want to learn more if you're not already a customer? And, how do we best help you in terms of your stormwater program and the software side? And learning more can be, we've got a bunch of different use cases and applications, and we can go deeper in certain areas than others. Today was a big, broad discussion around stormwater, a topic I'm very passionate about, and something that we've invested a lot of time on tooling for to kind of cover all the areas. But it's possible that you have a specific need much more deeply in one area. All right. Well, with that, we've got a couple minutes for questions. So I'm gonna take a look at some of these. So one of the questions is California specific. It's around the new TMDLs came out July 1st, 2020, with the amendments to the industrial general permit around enforcement actions in California around TMDL violations. And have there been any enforcement actions? I haven't personally seen any, but I have to admit I'm not in the weeds as much as I was, years ago on this. So I'd have to ask the team that's kind of more on the ground and working with folks if they've seen any violations. I have not heard of any. I've seen more frequently in California and in other states, NOVs going out for you didn't submit your annual report, or we know it was raining, we looked at the rain records, and there wasn't any samples collected. Those have been the more common violations out there. Is one of the questions, a little technical, but we'll dive into it. Is a roof area considered an industrial source? It's very debatable. Sometimes not. If you don't have like a roof event going out to it, I'd probably say it's not an industrial source. You know, if it's just a roof, you know, kind of like your employee parking lot, probably a non-industrial area. Now, if you are running process equipment and have like piping that could leak onto that roof, that could be an industrial source. Same with like exhaust vents from inside the building, manufacturing processes that could get emissions going onto it. That could be an industrial source. It really depends. Some stories of like aerial deposition from a certain industrial operation down the street that was blowing wind, hit somebody's roof, goes down the storm drains, all of a sudden they're over for zinc. That can be problematic, but at the same time, that facility considered the roof as an industrial because they had process equipment. Even though their stuff wasn't leaking, the neighbor had aerial deposition. So a roof can be a very tricky place. Same thing, I've seen people exceed like BOD or COD due to probably like pollen or tree droppings on their roof. Their process equipment, they were sampling for COD because of the type of industry they were in, but then they had this impact to their roof for you know, organic reasons. So roof can be a tricky place. I would try to get it out if you can justify it, you know, that there's no vents, there's no industrial process areas on it. Question about on the tech side, like, do you need a server? You know, what do you need to do to run Mapistry software? And the answer is nothing. It's all web-based. So as long as you have an internet connection, you can load up this web app. The phone app, all you need to do is occasionally be within cell service or Wi-Fi or something to download the forms, but the forms can even work offline in your phone. So you don't need a server. If you can go to any website, you'll be able to go to Mapistry and just log in. So it creates a lot of flexibility, especially with remote work. If you're logging in from home or in the office, you're able to access that data no matter where you are. So a question about like sample data, and specifically in California for smarts, is yes, once the lab data goes into our system, when you hit download, it comes out in a format for smarts. So you don't have to do manual data entry into smarts. You can just upload that file into smarts. The whole goal is to make this a really efficient process. So the workflow typically is somebody goes out on their site, phone, does their visual observation, puts their pH data in, they collect the sample, they send it to the lab. The lab sends it via email to Mapistry where we can pull it into our system, and then you can just download it and it'll combine the lab data with your pH data into a single file that you can then download and upload into smarts. So you don't have to do that manual data entry of like, you get the PDF, you sit there and you like look at the lines and enter it into smarts. Question on training, and this will probably be the final question. I'll try to answer via email a lot of the other ones because I know there's quite a few here. Can training records be exported? Yes, from the e-learning, you could get an export of like your learners list of who's been trained, what courses. Typically, we'll see, especially on like larger scale ones, we'll set up somebody as an admin on the e-learning side so they can manage that. But you could export out all your learners. There's also a document and record keeping section in Mapistry where if you did an in-person training and you had a PDF form, you could also put that in Mapistry as a record to show proof of training. And then we can always create like a log in Mapistry if you want to do training in person or some other way and then log it in Mapistry, you can do that and then export that out. So a bunch of different ways, but the short answer is yes, you can always track and export your training records. So with that, we're right at the top of the hour. Appreciate everybody for jumping on. Feel free to reach out, info@Mapistry, if you want more info on the software, or you can reach out to me, Ryan at Mapistry. But we'll follow up with a copy of this recording and some slides for you. Have a great day. Thank you.